Godzilla, a giant monster who appears from Tokyo Bay and stomps through the city of Japan. From the outside, it's understandable why people would see this as mindless cinema garbage. A monster for the children of Japan who want a cheap spectacle to watch on a bored afternoon at the theaters. But when you pull back the curtains, you start to see there are many layers to the story of Godzilla, King of the Monsters. The symbolism of destruction created by a nuclear-charged monster in order to parallel the events of Hiroshima and the Lucky Dragon 5 incident stuck in the minds of post-World War II Japanese citizens, and is part of the reason Godzilla is seen as such an accomplishment in cinematic history, which led to it becoming a pop culture icon. In part by the director Ishiro Honda and the suitmation pioneer Eiji Tsuburaya, whose goal was to make a politically charged film disguised as an afternoon Daikaiju creature feature. Ironically, as the years went on, that would start to change as Toho Studios decided to opt for a safer, less daring option. Godzilla started to embrace its Americanized name, the name it was given when distributed across seas, but in return started to embrace its Daikaiju side, with less political commentary and more large-scale kaiju battles between foes such as Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, Space Godzilla, and even at one point the American TriStar Godzilla from 1998, saying he was never the true Godzilla, but the Americans thinking he was Godzilla, when in reality he was Zilla. I know none of this makes sense if you haven't seen Final Wars or anything before that, but just never mind. Don't get me wrong, I love these films. They represent everything I love about the tokusatsu genre while just being fun and exciting, but they also felt safe, that it was more style over substance. After Godzilla Final Wars, which celebrated Godzilla's 50th anniversary and let the series rest, it was a solid 10 years before a new Godzilla film would come out. Godzilla 2014 would release in America with an ultimately approach.
And it is gonna send us back to the Stone Age!
While it was okay for movie standards, it still left a hole in the fans who had been waiting for a true Toho Godzilla. But before we talk about that, let's take a step back. On March 11th, 2011, the Tohoku earthquake erupted through Japan, causing a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, which turned into the most powerful earthquake Japan has ever faced. It then went on to create the Tohoku tsunami, which led to more destruction in the meltdown of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, causing it to spread radiation throughout the area. In total, it killed almost 16,000 people, with around 2,500 people reported missing, and will probably kill more from cancer caused by the poor evacuation of the radioactive area. Further investigation showed that it was possible to predict and that the power plant didn't follow basic safety instructions for events like that. This is a tragedy that affected Japan in the years prior. Now what does that have to do with Godzilla? Well, in 2015 it was announced that a new Godzilla film was in the works, co-directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, the creators of the hit 1995 anime series Neon Genesis Evangelion. Shin Godzilla, or Shin Gojira, or Godzilla Resurgence, or whatever it is you call it, is set in the modern-day Japan that's in the midst of a crisis when a giant monster makes its way onto shore out of seemingly nowhere. In a sense, the protagonist is Japan itself, as there's not really one main character you follow throughout the film. Instead, you get to see multiple perspectives on the event from different people and how they react to a situation like this. For the most part, as the film goes on, you mainly follow the Japanese government as they try to keep the crisis under control. Remember earlier when I said that the Japanese government, the real-life Japanese government, could have predicted and done something about the Tohoku crisis? Well, let's just say this film doesn't shy away from its political commentary. Yes, what the original Gojira did 62 years before, the new Godzilla does again. Instead of commentary on nuclear war, it becomes a commentary on Japan's own government. It's not subtle about it too. It seems like every time the monster moves or takes a step, there's some committee or debate or vote or grand discussion about it. They argue and delay, and by the time they're ready to do something, the entire city is in ruins. Directly paralleling what a lot of the people whose family members died in the Tohoku crisis thought of the Japanese government at the time. But it never gets to the point of being ridiculous. They aren't painted as corrupt or greedy politicians who don't care for human lives. They're painted as people. Just people with a problem that they're clueless on, despite their high authority. You see them by the end trying their hardest to contain the monster, and it almost goes through a small arc, that the monster brought them together in some light, made them work together in order to stop, well, the monster. Speaking of the monster, Godzilla is so much different from other incarnations of Godzilla. Not only does it look like a distorted, destroyed nuclear mess, but he also evolves from multiple forms, each representing a different disaster previously explained. These are paralleled in Godzilla's actions. Its first form drags across the city, crashing into cars and causing everything to collapse as it goes through the city streets. It directly parallels the Tohoku earthquake. It also has vents in its body that it draws blood from because of its rapidly growing heat that oozes onto the roads below, very much like the tsunami, at least visually. Of course, you could also see the final form as an eventual Fukushima Daiichi parallel, mainly with its nuclear parallels and the fact that it's nuclear. What's interesting about Godzilla really is what it represents, because it seems to represent multiple things. To some, it's an embodiment of life. Not just the fact that it literally grows over time, but also that it seems to do everything out of a need to coexist. If you look close enough, Godzilla doesn't destroy the city out of a need to stomp on things, or because of humanity's sins against the world itself, but because it's in his way. He never seems like he's trying to do anything on purpose, but more the fact that he's living in a world he can't understand. A world that doesn't understand him, and a world in which he's not welcome. Also, Shin Godzilla has a much different design than most others. Usually they make Godzilla look pissed, but this time around Godzilla seems more sad most of the times. At some points completely in shock of what's going on around him. To further drive this point across, there's this big iconic scene where the government decides to drop bombs on Godzilla, causing it to bleed all over the city. In a fit of sheer panic, it activates its atomic breath and erupts the entire city in flames. The thing is, while Godzilla's atomic breath is usually something cool, a weapon to use against other kaiju in other movies, here we feel sad, distressed, almost depressed a little. It's a very depressing image. We feel completely in shock and silence as Godzilla panics and destroys the city. And we mainly know this because of the song that's playing in the background. Who Will Know by Shiro Sagisu. It's an operatic song that plays in the background during this big iconic scene, and it's seemingly from Godzilla's perspective, and discusses Godzilla being alone in this world with no equal, being hunted down by humans because of his sheer existence. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that he's depressed, as some people really don't mind saying, but it definitely makes you feel something. Whether you hear the lyrics the first time or not, which you wouldn't really because it's opera, it honestly invokes some sort of weird emotion. I have no embarrassment saying that when I saw this scene, it made me tear up a little bit. It's just that well done. And the big cherry on top is this last shot once Godzilla is in a frozen solid state in the middle of Tokyo. The last shot of the entire film. The camera crawls up Godzilla's tail to reveal humanoid Godzilla hybrids, suffering as they try to materialize. With no explanation, it's pretty haunting and can mean multiple things. Maybe Godzilla was trying to escape being frozen, and this was the only way it knew how, to materialize into smaller beings, or maybe it represents him having some sort of godly power? This actually leads to another theory, that Godzilla is literally a figment of God. In the Japanese language, the word Shin can mean many things. New, evolved, and in some cases, God. Now, bear with me and try not to think too much about the title technically meaning God Godzilla, but the point I'm trying to make is in the film, Godzilla is seen as a destructive force come to destroy the civilians of Earth and also maybe, eventually, the Earth itself. This harkens back to an older short made by good old Hideaki known as Kyoshinhei Tokyo ni Arewaru, or its Americanized name, Giant God Monster Appears in Tokyo. It's a 10-minute short made for the Tokusatsu Miniatures Museum that was opened by Hideaki himself, who grew up as a huge fan of Tokusatsu. It's supposed to reflect the ways Daikaiju and especially Tokusatsu can be used for large-scale story, or basically anything that isn't made for television, specifically for 8-year-olds on Sunday mornings. This short was produced by Studio Ghibli, in fact, as one of their first live-action works and went surprisingly in-depth story-wise, with the central theme being, if it only took God 7 days to make the Earth, how long would it be for him to take it all away? Shin Godzilla, while not as extreme, reflects upon that idea. Not just the fact that he came out of seemingly nowhere with the power to destroy cities in an instant, but also that Godzilla is seen as a higher form of humanity, a higher being. The ending tail shot could also be that he's creating humans in a way. Like, he's literally creating life from its tail, if you could wrap your head around that. It could potentially also be a small commentary on science versus religion, with science being the main thing the government uses to fight against it. This could especially be the case seeing as Hideaki Anno hasn't shied away from religious symbolism in the past, with stuff like Neon Genesis Evangelion, which took an almost nihilistic approach to the whole situation of God and religion and all that, and it's a long rabbit hole. I didn't even talk about the entire tokusatsu genre. I've stuck to specifically this one movie for the most part, besides a brief mention of the first one. It's a lot, and we don't really know what it means. Godzilla could mean literally life, or it could mean God, or it could mean a number of things. It could be a direct parallel to this, it could be a direct parallel to that, to the government not doing things, to the Fukushima Daiichi power plant malfunction, to the Tohoku crisis, to pretty much anything. There's so many layers and possibilities to everything to interpret it as, and I don't know. Maybe it doesn't mean any of that. Maybe it's just supposed to be a giant lizard and no one cares. But that's up to you. Okay, I'm done. Whatever. Go see Shin Godzilla.